It's day 6 of what was supposed to be winter camp in Iceland. My friends are dead, and I don't feel cold anymore. So, there's a device here which perfectly translates speech to text. I'm currently sitting in a freezer. It's the safest place here, and I don't think I'll be caught. There's a whole load of computers and old laptops just like in the main lab, but this thing can turn my voice into words. Okay, so I'm not cold anymore. I should feel this place, the deathly temperature enveloping me. But I can't feel it. I wish I was cold. It was supposed to be a freaking youth retreat. Mom thought it was the perfect vacation, a trip to Iceland during the holidays. I've never been abroad before, so this was my chance to branch out and actually go somewhere with my life. Mom didn't mean to, but she was unintentionally smothering me. I'm 18 years old, and I was yet to leave the confines of our tiny little town. The brochure and website looked promising. Described as a once-in-a-lifetime getaway to northern Iceland, the more remote parts away from the bustling city of Reykjavik and the temptation of tourist spots like the Blue Lagoon, it was a modern, toasty cabin in the middle of nowhere, a youth center specifically built for lost kids trying to find themselves. They really hammered that in with every page. It was impossible not to get lost in the idea of strangers turned soulmates. The brochure's front cover was a photo of the cabin at night lit up in cozy golden light under the famous aurora borealis. There were glossy full-spread pages of photos of students with their arms around each other, their smiles wide, eyes gleeful and excited. There were luxury hotel rooms, an all-you-can-eat breakfast buffet, a heated swimming pool both indoors and outdoors, and a chance to see the northern lights in the flesh. Seriously, this place looked incredible. I was taking a gap year before heading to college. I had 2 summers worth of savings. So, a trip to Iceland, also known as the land of fire and ice, was a step in the right direction of finding myself and my identity after being cooped up with my mom for 18 years. I didn't question any of the red flags in front of me, so in a way, maybe being in this situation is our fault. The plane ride was 5 hours, a pretty short flight, but I still managed to sleep for most of it, zonked out anxiety meds mixed with Red Bull. The Final Destination movies had really screwed with my head. The guy sitting next to me with a thing for old school more gave up on his dog-eared copy of the Maltese Falcon. The cover was already giving me pretentious film student vibes, and watched the flight path on the screen in front of us. I was conscious for maybe 20 minutes in total on the flight. The first 10 minutes in the air, trying not to throw up from the pressure, and pressing my face against the window, staring at the blur of white enveloping us, and then 3 or 4 hours in, when the pilots excitedly told us all to look out of the windows, where we could just see the northern lights, as the sky was starting to darken. That was when I realized my seatmate had personality, the way he was shaking me awake with eyes and grinning lips, like we were kids on Christmas morning. Hey! It took him nudging me maybe 4 times to spring me from slumber, drool pooling down my chin, my cheek uncomfortably pressed to the window. Ugh! Look! He shoved me again, and, still disoriented and kinda nauseous, I focused on where he was pointing, blinking rapidly. He didn't know my name, so the guy resorted to just repeatedly stabbing me with his index, hoping for the best. The rest of our group were freaking out, yelling, some of them crying. You would think the freaking plane was crashing. When my seatmate leaned over me, prodding the window, I followed his finger. The sky was a crystalline blue color that was bridging twilight. But I could still see them. I remember my stomach turned, Red Bull creeping back up my throat. We were so far up. Almost in space. So far from home, so far from the ground, and yet I felt completely and totally at peace. I remember my seatmate shuffled closer to me, like he was trying to bond, trying to share an experience. The guy was older than me by a few years, early 20s. Between his mop of unruly brown curls and southern accent, he was cute in an endearing way. He smelled like sandalwood and fall leaves, his flickering breath in my face reeked of the mint candies he was chewing on. At that moment, we were both real and human, and witnessing a sight that was almost painful. the type of pain that stole the breath from your lungs. There they were, an intense greenish blue illuminating the almost night. If I had a gun to my head and was forced to pick a favorite moment from this trip, I'd say watching the northern lights with a complete stranger, the two of us bouncing in our seats like two toddlers, was definitely a human moment I will never forget. Before everything went downhill, and our cozy trip to Iceland became something else entirely. I should have noticed things were shady from the get-go. The flight was just kids on the excursion. I thought it was a usual economy flight until my seatmate pointed out the lack of adults. We were supposed to land in Akureyri Airport. It was the first stop on our carefully put together itinerary on the app. But the pilot insisted we were taking a detour due to weather patterns. When we finally landed, I noticed we were in the middle, and I mean the middle of nowhere. The unnamed airport was empty, bar an American guy in his mid to late 20s with a too-wide grin, holding a sign with, "Hi. I'm Jake, your camp leader. It's nice to meet you," written in bubble writing. Kinda juvenile. Camp? I shot my only friend, my seatmate who was still being stubborn about his name, a panicked look. His optimistic smile didn't waver. Winter camp, maybe? They probably call it something else here. Pulling my hood over my ears, I was shivering. But this place is empty. My unnamed seatmate shrugged, wrapping his arms around himself. It's got KFC, he nodded at the familiar logo several feet away. See? We're fine. It's shut, I hissed out, ignoring his raised brow. Looking closer, the store looked almost abandoned. There was a notice on the door, but I couldn't read it. I don't think it was ever open. Well, it's winter, this guy had an answer for everything. Maybe it's shut for the season? It is mid-December. I wasn't convinced, tightening my clammy fingers around the handle of my suitcase. The only thing stopping me from going into panic mode was Kelly Clarkson's Under the Tree playing over the intercom. Now that I think about it, I think that was my splintering point. There was just us, a silent airport, and a Christmas song crackling over our heads. Yeah, but it's fried chicken, I had to raise my voice over the saxophone solo. I would understand an ice cream store being shut, but KFC? He snorted. Another song started up, a popular hit. This time I reveled in its familiarity. My seatmate nudged me to the catchy beat, and I almost stumbled off my feet. You're paranoid. Creepy, the brunette behind us muttered, a slight Scandinavian tinge to her accent. I could barely see the girl, a bright pink scarf wrapped around her neck and the bottom half of her face, light brown hair sticking from a knitted hat. She introduced herself as Aurora, to which my seatmate had responded with a grin. Yes, like the Borealis. Her parents were obsessed with the country, so the name felt right. I was thankful for Aurora's presence. According to my seatmate, Aurora was like a tour guide up until the detour, occasionally offering her skepticism. She had no idea where we were, and Aurora knew northern Iceland like the back of her hand, thanks to her mom being born in Selfoss, a town further south. This was her 8th trip to Iceland, apparently, and she had never heard of or seen this place. Which was concerning. I was already overwhelmed with the lack of the people, the stark emptiness of the airport, and the temperature already bleeding into my bones. I could see the night sky through a clear glass roof, inky oblivion with no stars, no moon, no light. Through the automatic doors at the exit was the same. Darkness that was impenetrable, like this tiny airport in northern Iceland was completely cut off from the outside world. The others were already questioning our camp leader, who was definitely a frat boy in college. Jake reminded me of a surfer dude, or the lead love interest in a teen drama. He spoke with his hands, gesturing wildly, like, "Hey, chill. It's all good, man. It's chill, bro." This guy had definitely been thoroughly trained to keep the peace. Ignoring questions like, "Where are we? And why can't I get a signal?" He successfully evaded the subject by promising exactly what was on the brochure, spewing the exact same shtick while landing us out into the dark, straight into snow up to our ankles. Jake, admittedly, did a great job of at least trying to keep up morale when the ice-cold chill slammed into us. What was advertised on the website and on the itinerary was an Uber straight from Akureyri Airport. But we weren't in Akureyri. I had no idea where we were. I expected at least some signs of life, traffic on the roads, or maybe convenience stores. No. The roads were blocked with snow, and the sidewalk was black ice. There were no streetlights, no traffic lights. I fell twice, almost taking my seatmate with me. In front of us was the dark, nothing but pooling oblivion, a vastness that was almost breathtaking. I wouldn't be able to differentiate the ground from the sky if it weren't for the snow. Aurora, for once, was not helping. She was making me more nervous, repeatedly telling us that it wasn't normal for there to be no streetlights, no sign of civilization in any direction I turned, my breath caught in wisps of white. When we boarded a rickety coach, she commented that her vast knowledge of Iceland ended right there. She had no idea where the frick we were, or where we were going. When the bus only drove us further into the dark, down winding roads between snowdrifts, I couldn't resist speaking up. Until then, I had been relying on Radwimps, playing on 6% phone battery to loosen the knot in my gut. "Where are we going?" I demanded, leaning over in my seat. Jake's response was almost a knee-jerk reaction, his head whipping around, smile broadening. "Don't worry, we'll be there soon," was all he said, like this guy was a stuck record, or a confused robot. Now that I was really looking at him in the striking light bathing the bus, I was sure this guy wasn't blinking. His smile was too wide, almost eerily so. "Why not look outside? You might be able to see the northern lights." He had repeated this over 10 times. I stopped counting when we left the airport. "Look outside. Look at the northern lights," was all he said, occasionally commenting about how good the outdoor pool at the campsite was. Oh, so now it was campsite. I tried to be positive, despite my slowly thinning sanity. I tried to think camp was another way of saying youth center. I even tried one last look outside, desperate to see anything. Anything that would give me hope we weren't being lured into a place of no return. But there was nothing. When I pressed my forehead against the frosty window, there was no light at the end of a seemingly endless tunnel under a suffocating sky, only a slowly collapsing pinprick growing progressively more narrow. The only light was the illumination from the headlights splitting the road in half, and even they were starting to flicker out as we delved into nothing. Leaning back in my seat, I clung on for dear life as the bus flew over bumps in the road. "I'm going to die," I thought, just as the bus slid sideways before righting itself. Jake, of course, was quick to settle our panic. "This is going to be fun, I promise." He honked out a laugh when the bus flew over another bump which sent my head smacking into the window. Stars in my eyes, not in the sky. My seatmate asked me if I was okay. His clammy fingers entangled with mine. He was shaking. Still didn't tell me his name. Jake's laugh grew raucous in my spinning head, my mind drifting into fog as the bus continued on. Further and further into the void-like tunnel with no ending. "Wait until you see the pool." I don't know if it's evident from the tone in my voice, I don't know if it comes across in writing, but there was no youth center retreat. There was no warm cabin, no heated pool, unless you count the hot spring that was just a hole in the ground, several feet away from me. It wasn't even a campsite. Jake was the only one with a tent, and his was more of a glamping luxury with a bed. When we asked where ours were, he spouted more bullshit about it being a fun survival exercise and we would be taken to the retreat the next morning. "If you survive," he winked before disappearing into his abnormally large tent. So, that left us fending for ourselves. Jake wasn't answering questions, or was answering questions, with cryptic answers. We made a fire, which had taken us 10+ attempts due to the ice-cold wind blowing it out, and our slowly diminishing sanity. We did have the natural hot spring and were taking turns dipping our toes in. I think it hit me when frostbite was starting to kick in and I had stopped dragging myself to and from the hot spring to plunge my hands into our only source of heat. I was starting to lose track of time, trying to submerge more of myself into the water as the night went on and the temperature dropped. Aurora told me I was making it worse, so I slumped down on rock-hard ground, pulled my legs to my chest to conserve body heat, and allowed my dizzy thoughts to drift. It sounded like the perfect vacation. That's what I thought, drinking in each face in front of me, our small huddle of shadows around a slowly dying fire. Sitting in minus temperatures directly under the northern lights sounds good on paper, or watching a TikTok wrapped up in bed. Those videos have all been perfectly edited to catch your eye. The Blue Lagoon, famous volcanoes and hot springs, the culture and food. But actually being in the raw unedited footage they don't show, sitting on frozen ground in front of blurred oranges your brain isn't sure as fire or the sun, any heat being whipped away by the ice-cold wind chill, slowly freezing to death. And I mean all of you. Your bones and blood feel numb, your skin doesn't feel like yours, and your thoughts are scattered between memories of home and hope that help might come. Also chocolate fudge sundaes. I was wrapped up in 3 coats. Aurora's lips were turning blue. The sky was oblivion above me. No stars. No northern lights. Conversations vary from fear that we were going to die, absolution that we were going to die, and then threats to kill Jake. We planned it all out. When we were still coherent, Penn had devised a plan to steal the guy's phone. We had all agreed and repeatedly said yes, we are going to do this. But I'm not sure how to describe the onset of hypothermia. Confusion. Penn said 3 times that he was going to steal Jake's phone. But he was still sitting across from me, frowning at the fire. His head was cocked, and when I really concentrated, I could see icicles slowly spreading across his brow. I wasn't sure if I was seeing things, but after dazedly staring at my seatmate for a while, I realized I had imagined he had a name. Penn. He still wasn't giving me his real one, despite his hands and mine. I had a moment of clarity, which was quickly suffocated by a chill that almost knocked me backwards. Wait, no, did he tell me his name? No, he definitely didn't. So, why was his name on my tongue? Penn. His jacket was over my shoulders, while Aurora's was hanging off of his. I had Nick's gloves, and Nick was borrowing my sweatshirt. Ethan had one of my socks, and Sonny was wearing my jeans. Does anyone have any spooky stories? Penn broke the silence, which was starting to sound like death itself. So quiet, and yet peaceful. His teeth were chattering, rubbing his hands together. 10 minutes earlier, he tried to stuff his hands into the fire. Nick stopped him. I still didn't know his name. Penn's smile was the shell of his former self, no longer a wide grin bursting with optimism, it was more of a grimace not even trying. I could see icicles forming under his nose too. That was kind of worrying. Did hypothermia include turning into ice? I thought, angling my head to see him better. No, I was probably hallucinating. Pressing my head into my lap, I exhaled breath into my hands. It was freezing cold, almost enough to snap me out of it. I was so freaking cold, and nothing was going to get better. I had half a mind to slice open my hand to feel the warmth of my own blood, but I couldn't bring myself to move. Moving was tiring, and I just wanted to go to sleep. I've got one. Nick mumbled into his knees. I thought he was asleep, his body very slowly tipping into Ethan. Once upon a time, a group of people sued their psycho camp leader for abandoning them in the freaking cold. Penn nodded slowly, his arms wrapped around his legs, chin resting on his knees. That was beautiful. Truly poignant, Nick. I noticed Penn's voice was slurring a little. In the flicker of orange flame, I noticed his breath wasn't reacting with the cold air anymore. Strange. I remember rocking back and slamming back first onto the ground. I didn't move, closing my eyes, until Aurora dragged me back to a sitting position. "Stay awake," she told me. I tried, but it was hard, especially when I stopped feeling cold and suddenly I was all warm and toasty, ready to sleep.